Thank you so much for joining us. We're here with Ariel Shtarkman, who's the founder of Orca Capital. We're going to give everyone another, let's call it 90 seconds to finish dialing in, and we'll get started. So thank you very much. As we're waiting to officially start, can you maybe talk to us about some of the changes you've seen in daily life since you've had a few month head start on some of us in the West?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm based in Hong Kong. I mean, I feel like we're now getting into the second wave and things are actually getting a little bit more serious now, where our government just announced that bars and restaurants are not allowed to sell liquor anymore. It's kind of interesting because people can still go out and eat, but just not drink. But given that we had the second wave of a lot of returnees from Europe and the US, which spiked the numbers in Hong Kong quite significantly, a lot of the restaurants actually are shutting down voluntarily. I was just today getting messages from all my favorite restaurants, as luck has it, saying, look, we're concerned about what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. We're shutting down and we will come back in 3 weeks. What happened over kind of right after Chinese New Year, when COVID-19 really started to take shape in Wuhan. I mean, Hong Kong was a ghost town. I have been living here for 12 years. I've never seen Hong Kong so deserted. I was here throughout. I was here for Chinese New Year and I didn't travel after. But the 2 weeks after Chinese New Year basically were, I want to say, 10% capacity. Anywhere you go, it was just empty. First, by sort of a self-imposed quarantine. I mean, people here, after all the scars of SARS, knew what to do. I mean, the government shut down basically all the government offices for about 2 weeks, and encouraged the private sector to work from home. So everyone was working from home for about 2 weeks, but also a lot of people who basically left for Chinese New Year, all those expats, didn't return because they were worried about coming back to Hong Kong. So everyone stayed in Japan and France and Italy and US, and basically extended their vacations because school was canceled pretty much. That was the first thing they did. They said no more school first until March, then until April, and now our schools are shut indefinitely.
Oh, wow.
So I became an expert in homeschooling, in addition to many other things. I mean, indefinitely meaning probably until next school year. The official government exams, entry exams into universities are postponed. So basically the education sector is shut down completely. Everyone is doing, of course, Zoom meetings and trying to educate online. So I would say that, but I don't think that in Hong Kong, we had the shutdown in a scale that we had in Wuhan, or a shutdown that you experience now in New York, Deb, because I know you're there, or in Italy. Of course, time will tell. I mean, again, we just had a very bad weekend. Every day we had about 40 cases. For Hong Kong, it's a lot, given how well we contained this situation since the beginning. So I think that the next 2 weeks basically we'll see kind of working from home almost for, I would say, 80–90% of the population. No tourists are allowed into Hong Kong now, only returning citizens. So if you're not a Hong Kong resident, you cannot come to Hong Kong. There are no flights and they will not let you in. Again, the F&B sector kind of is taking a pause. So that's in a nutshell.
Great.
So hang in there.
Thank you. No, so thank you everyone for another installment of Coresight Conversations. We're very honored to have with us my very good friend, Ariel Shtarkman. She's the founder of Orca Capital and co-founder of Atom Assets. And we've asked Ariel to join us today to talk a little bit about the future of retail and real estate. She's somebody I've always gone to from a prop tech perspective, and just to get an understanding of what's happening in the East as it relates to retail. So Ariel, I just want to ask you a quick question in terms of, this site, what have you seen so far in Greater China with regards to the retail sector and how they've been able to adapt so quickly under the current circumstances?
So, of course, and thank you. I'm very honored to be here. As Deborah mentioned, she's someone I look always up to on anything when it comes to innovation, retail, tech, etc. So hopefully we'll have a very interesting conversation. I think that in the beginning, what I noticed in China, at least from my friends in the industry, they were a bit in a state of a shock and didn't quite know how to deal with it. Lockdown, I mean, basically everything was shut down. And as you know, in mainland China, when it's a lockdown, it's a real lockdown. No one goes out on the street. If they tell you that shops needs to be closed, everything is closed. Of course, it was a very severe impact initially on retailers who, small retailers, larger retailers, of course, shopping malls. But then slowly, I've seen several things happening. Of course, the Chinese consumer is a very digitally savvy consumer. I mean, they do probably 80 to 90% of their shopping online already. So for them, it wasn't really an adaptation of online, ordering online for whatever they need, whether it's their daily needs or anything extra, or masks or sanitizers, whatever it is. It was more acceleration. I mean, and if any, I understand that some of those online platforms really benefited because people are basically locked down at home, they're bored, they do have a little bit of money to spend, and they were just buying, not necessarily luxury goods, but they were consuming. I think that another really interesting paradigm shift is in the whole last mile logistics.
Yeah, that's really critical.
They already had pretty strong distribution channels. And of course, initially, people kind of were a bit in a shock. Well, how do I deliver stuff? I mean, I cannot be outside. But yet, you know, they found ways of that last mile logistics because it was already pretty strong to begin with. I think that one very interesting theme that has already started to happen, and it just unfortunately didn't happen on time, is drone deliveries. As I mentioned to Deborah, one real estate developer I know, he is building drone airports as we speak in China, in one city right now, not in Wuhan, but a city in the north, with a contract for many more of those airports to come, in order to ensure that last mile logistics, it's only for logistics and e-commerce. So those drones are going to be used for delivering goods for individuals, for offices, etc. And now he was not quite ready. He was supposed to have his first airports opening end of March, but then of course everything shut down in China end of January, and he's probably about 6 to 8 weeks behind schedule. But if you can imagine, if they had this whole drone last mile figured out, I think things will be even better, I would say. So these are sort of the themes that I've been seeing and hearing from China. Of course, you know, the negative is that it is a demand and a supply shock. I mean,
right.
A lot of people lost revenue, losing their jobs. The government in China, of course, is taking care of the unemployed. The worst thing that can happen is that they will have too high of an unemployment and people are going to go into social unrest and negativity. So the government probably is doing more and more to take care of that individual. So things were looking quite bleak, but slowly they're starting to go back to normality. I understand that in the south of China, some schools are starting to be open. Again, basically 60 million people in Hubei province were completely shut down. And then 1.4 billion people who live in China were in some sort of a lockdown, which is probably much more serious than what we see in the West.
So one question, we heard unbelievable stats in terms of how retailers, especially those in the athleisure space and the beauty space, performed on International Women's Day, which is March 8th. So kind of right when, you know, China was, you know, in the tunnel, if you will. What do you think, or what did you see from retailers that, you know, whether it was online or offline, that has continued to help drive their sales and customer engagement?
Well, I think several things. Some of those retailers went into a very aggressive in a good way, but aggressive customer engagement. And it's not just providing discounts. I mean, that's sort of a given. You would expect that retailers will want to sell the goods fast, and now they don't have any stores, they don't have any customers offline, so they want to kind of sell everything online. But I think that just putting whatever 10, 15, 25% discount is not enough. I think it's that customer engagement is sending tips on whatever your company is doing, if it's athleisure and beauty in particular. I mean, those I think are sort of the mini winners, if you will, of the retail category, because people are stuck at home. They might be exercising more at home. They still want to spend on beauty, etc. But it's all that customer engagement with tips, with interesting content. Content, in my opinion, is becoming more and more differentiator between the winners and the losers of the retail space, and sort of showing the customer that there is now things are not looking so good, but there is a light in the end of the tunnel. And almost, you know, we will probably talk on the call about that whole notion of experience in retail and what will drive people to go back to those physical shopping malls or even high street retail. Now no one is having those experiences. Again, everyone is at home. So how do you bring those experiences from the physical retail onto their digital platforms?
Great. And I think we've got a quick poll we're going to launch. We'll have that run in the background for the next question or two. Ariel, you mentioned experiences, and I will say many of the retailers and the shopping mall REITs, because we're still so early in all of this here in the US, and I think just in the West in general, we've had a lot of questions in terms of kind of what do you do first? How do you respond to the customer first? How are you there for them? And, you know, whether it's, you know, running a sale or content, can you talk a little bit more in terms of what an experience looks like right now and what you think an experience looks like in the future?
Well, but just to confirm, what experience looks like right now on the digital side,
Correct.
not on the physical side. Well, again, I think that notion of experience is whether it's an interesting content and something that people can relate to or read while they're pretending to work from home or working from home, you know. That's a whole separate category that we will chat later on. I think it's content. I think it's any interesting sort of gimmicks, whether it's incorporating VR, and while you're sitting at home, you can, you know, if it's apparel, for example, can you create your avatar and play with it in the VR or kind of 3D setting? I think that, you know, I was looking at the questions on the poll. I think that retailers really should try probably not to cancel orders and try to even having that experience of ordering online to be as seamless and easy as possible. Of course, easier said than done, especially if you don't have flights between countries or inter-country. So how do you do that last mile logistic in times of pretty much a wartime shutdown? That's another question. But I think that everything that retailers can do to sort of bring that offline experience into the digital platform. And for me, it's really customer engagement, content. Bring in some sort of hope into the picture, saying that, well, you know what? This is what our store of the future will look like. Something along those lines. I think it's an opportunity for retailers, especially probably for kind of the multi-brand platforms, to take stock and see, well, what works, what doesn't work. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of my favorite brands from the US, Intermix. But I think that they completely sort of missed the plot. Until today, they've been sending emails with like, well, 7 days, 7 outfits to go out. Well, no one is going out. I mean, that didn't stop. And I find it a little bit peculiar. I think that's...
Ariel, let me just be we're all going out and walking our dogs so much that the dogs don't want to be walked anymore. So we are going out, but, you know, it's not from a fashion perspective.
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, it's not going out to like 3 different restaurants in a day, right?
Right.
And again, you know me, I'm the first person to go out, right? But as we were joking before, I probably need to buy a whole wardrobe for all the webinars I'm going to be doing.
Right, exactly. Well, so I have a question, right? You talked earlier about Lynn Crawford, and for those of you who don't know Lynn Crawford in the West, one of the most amazing, if not the most amazing department store retailer in Greater China. What have you seen them do? What has resonated with you, not only as a consumer, but what have you been most impressed in terms of how quickly they've been able to adapt? Because I think most people's perceptions is that department stores are going to be the last to adapt. And, you know, we'd love any hope you can share with us.
So again, excellent question. And I feel like, you know, Lynn Crawford already, especially in Hong Kong, was hit pretty badly because we had a very tough year in Hong Kong with the protests and the social unrest, and I will not touch upon it on this call. But Lynn Crawford was already sort of hurting quite a lot, as of a lot of retailers in Hong Kong in particular, particularly luxury goods. But what I noticed Lynn Crawford is doing for the last really month, or 6-7 weeks, they completely changed the strategy of that customer engagement. Again, they send emails almost every day with content. Now, it's not, again, they would be out of touch with times, and if they were selling, if they continue to send those expensive apparel items and promote this, but almost every email is about wellness, is about beauty, it's about, you know, tips of, you know, what do you do to protect your immune system? Again, some beauty tips, which are quite interesting. And again, of course, in the end of that email, you have all the products which you can order online, which totally makes sense, right? But I think that what they're doing is quite smart, because what I understand, wellness trend in China already has been on the rise. On the offline world, kind of how do you put all those wellness concepts into your shopping mall? And now I think it will only accelerate because people want to, health suddenly became sort of the most important part. Health.
And it's mental health and physical health, right? I mean, it's a two. And so there, I think, you know, we're in kind of a new, and this is where actually retailers could step up, right? This whole mental health aspect is all very new for everyone. And, you know, I think going back to, even if you hear, you know, words of wisdom, you know, a positive message every day, I think you'll feel differently about the retailer. And, you know, one other question going back to kind of Lynn Crawford and just the retailers in general, have you seen an uptick in gamification? What have you seen interesting from like a marketing perspective? You know, what's resonated with you as a consumer, and just where have you been like, wow, that's unbelievable they've been able to adapt so quickly?
Well, again, I think that, you know, given that I sit in Hong Kong, I cannot tell you that in Hong Kong I've seen anything like really outstanding in terms of gamification. But what I know in China, the bigger brands and even the smaller boutique brands, I mean, they're up in the ante on the WeChat channels, promotions, in terms of, you know, again, in Asia, the whole idea of, you know, characters and emojis is very strong. So again, they send you downloads of those like exclusive emojis by whatever brand, because people are stuck at home again and they're sending messages to each other. So immediately you can, I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but it totally makes sense. You can download a whole new library of emojis branded by XYZ company and then start sending it to your friends and trading it. Of course, anyone who is engaged with TikTok right now, I mean, everyone is literally on TikTok, doing those small clips. And of course, it provides endless entertainment now for those who are kind of like sitting at home and again, pretending to work from home. But the smart brands are really using all those communication channels to provide, again, interesting content. Something that all those memes and emojis and those 10-15 seconds clips on TikTok that will sort of capture the consumer imagination, provide the form of entertainment, and hopefully in the future will be sticky enough that that particular consumer will want to go on their website to consume digitally, or to go to the store to experience that additional layer, that physical layer, when it's possible.
And then what are you seeing in terms of interesting kind of marketing approaches? And, you know, I think that from a shopping, are you seeing anything from a shopping center perspective, and how are the shopping centers supporting their tenants? And is there any kind of marketing message how are they all working together right now, where, you know, typically we've had like a friction between the landlords and the tenants? Are you seeing that change?
Well, I think it has to change because it's a global crisis. We're all in it together. And in the end of the day, if you don't work together, if the shopping centers owners, if the retail real estate owners and the tenants don't come together to figure out how to survive, no one will. So it's a lose-lose. It's really a lose-lose battle. So several things I've seen here, and then I'll talk about sort of thinking for the future. Definitely a lot of the retail owners are cutting rents significantly. Now, it's not forever, but at least they're giving breaks, and that's the most sort of natural and first step, right? I mean, they don't have turnover revenue because there is no revenue of those tenants to begin with. So let's forget that for a second. But just on the base rent perspective, people are getting quite significant breaks. So it will give those tenants a little bit of a breathing room and thinking, and it's across retail, across F&B, kind of across all retail sectors, I would say. Of course, restaurants, in my opinion, are hurting the most, but I would think that they would be the first to recover because, again, after sitting at home for how many weeks or months and becoming, in the meanwhile, a totally digital consumer of everything else, you cannot substitute an experience of going to a restaurant and sharing a meal with friends. So probably restaurants will recover first, but they're the ones who need the most assistance from their landlords because their margins are just not as strong, as not high as apparel or traditional retailers. I think from the marketing perspective, a lot of, and you know, all the grade A shopping centers in Hong Kong, they're coming, they started to come out pretty quickly with those messages of what do we do to ensure that whoever comes into our doors is protected as much as they can. Whether it's, you know, temperature checks at entrance, which, you know, may or may not help, but at least it provides some sort of comfort, to having sanitizers pretty much everywhere. So I've seen a really interesting robot which was installed in Harbor City. You know that shopping center pretty well. So they have a lot of escalators, and they have, I wish I had a picture to show to the group, but basically it's a sleeve that goes on the escalator handle and it cleans the handle. It basically purifies the handle every time the circle finishes, which is quite brilliant. So, and those shopping centers are basically sending, you know, digital messaging to their consumer base saying, you know, we're trying to be safe, we're employing, you know, air purifiers, et cetera, everything to make sure the environment is somewhat protected.
Well, it also, right, it gives them a reason to reach out to customers and to drive engagement, because right now, right, the biggest challenge I think for the landlords is this idea of engagement. The retailers all have it through their own platforms, but, you know, in a world where, you know, let's just say from a shopping center perspective, we're out for a while, what would, you know, and we went through the poll in terms of, you know, kind of what's the most important for landlords right now, good relationship with the tenants. What can they do for the tenants? And also what can they do for themselves in some ways to drive awareness, to drive engagement?
Well, I think that, and again, it kind of depends if that particular shopping center has a digital platform which can engage with the tenants. I mean, I'll give an example here again in Hong Kong. You know, Hong Kong Land Portfolio, the Landmark Portfolio. I mean, they have their own sort of VIP platform for their customers, and they have different tiers. So they already pretty much captured everyone across their portfolio. So again, that's a very interesting, they already have it, so that's great. So they can continue to engage their very broad set of customers, regardless of the brands that those customers like, in terms of sending them messages about safety and health and promoting. It's kind of cross promotion, right? I mean, I think that the owners need to make sure that their tenants are not going out of business, and B,
but what can they
when,
really do to help with that? I mean, that's, to me, that's
well,
like,
look, I think that unfortunately, the first thing is really the discussion on rental rate, right? I mean, this is sort of the sticky point. You know, the owners make their money by leasing the space. The tenants are making their money by selling the goods and covering a portion of the rent, right? And ideally, you sell more goods than what your rent is. So I think that, to be honest, down the road, I don't know what the future holds still, but I think that it will change forever, that relationship with retailers and with the owners of real estate and the tenants, because we've been talking in the real estate circles for a while about different modes of retail leases, because what used to be, you know, 20-year leases and whatever, a percentage rent, turnover rent, I mean, those days are gone.
right.
Because as an owner, if I had a shopping center right now, I wouldn't want to have locked my leases for 10 or 20 years. It needs to be much shorter. And in Asia, they do it quite well. In Asia, all the leases are quite short. And then there is a whole discussion of turnover. I mean, if I go to a particular store, see a pair of shoes that I like, but realize very quickly on my mobile that, hey, I can buy it online on that particular brand online store at 20% discount, or at a different color that I like, I would do it online, right?
Well, but
as an owner, do you capture that, right?
You bring up something really interesting is when I shop in China, the sales associates are the ones who are like, don't buy it in the store, buy it online. It's 10, 20% cheaper. And that's also a very interesting, and it could be the way that the leases are structured. But I also found that where I've never had that, you know, kind of outside that part of the world, there's a really interesting kind of more unique relationship between the customer, the sales associate, the physical store. And can you talk about that a little bit more?
And of course, I mean, now, again, give you a personal example. I mean, as you know me, I love to shop. I actually love to shop physically because of that, because going to a lot of those stores in Hong Kong is an experience. You immediately get on the store WeChat or WhatsApp sort of distribution list. They send you, you know, when the new collections arrive, etc. But it's more than that. They can save you. That, you know, if you're trying something and you're not sure, they can keep it for you for 2, 3, 5, 7 days. It's that whole relationship that you build, and relationships are irreplaceable, right? So what the real estate owner can do, knowing all that, is really taking care of the good tenants, right? It is also an opportunity to realistically look at your portfolio and see, okay, what brands are here to stay and what brands are probably not going to make it. It's that relationship, you know, you have the 3 parties in the relationship: the actual customer, the owner of real estate, and the brand. The brands need to be providing the experience, but the owners need to be providing the environment for those experiences to kind of thrive. And also, why would people come into that particular place when we'll get out of the lockdown? And I think that it's, you know, it's still a sort of, it's still quite new. So the retailers, the owners of real estate, I know, at least here, are taking a very hard look on what the future holds and how the future of retail looks like, without saying, oh, you know, Landmark in Hong Kong will no longer be Landmark. It will still be Landmark, but what will be in it and how they engage with those customers, that will be a critical differentiator. And I would say just one more thing on that. You know, you talked about that platform and how the owners of real estate adapting and how they're communicating with their customers. Well, again, that will differentiate between the winners and losers. People who already built those customer engagement tools are probably going to have a rough time, but a little bit less of a rough time because their customers will be more loyal. Those who were still stuck in the past and didn't employ any of those digital prop tech, retail tech tools, will probably realize that, yeah, you need technology these days and you need customer engagement platforms, and it's the digital and the physical worlds are really merging when we come to retail.
What are you seeing from a prop tech perspective that's interesting or that can make a difference in this environment and going forward?
Well, I think that, and I've been personally invested in a couple of startups sort of in the cross between ESG, so anything to do with cleaner air or energy conservation and so forth, and some sort of a construction material, for example. I think that anything that can help those owners, and I'm talking about retail in particular, anything that can help those owners of retail to showcase their shopping malls as a more sustainable place to be, a cleaner place, cleaner air. You know, again, they conserve more energy and use that energy for the HVAC and lighting, etc. And in parallel, taking the data that they hopefully are trying to get from the consumers and from all those different engagement platforms, if those retailers can use just those two tools, those retail owners, apologize, I think they already are going to be 2, 3, 5 steps ahead of the competition. Because every retail owner will tell you, well, we have massive amounts of data. Everyone gets our Wi-Fi if you are smart enough to give Wi-Fi for everyone for free, right? But what do I do with this data? I mean, it's just names and people. And if you can take this opportunity to really mine the data and understand how to engage with those people who are coming into your doors, not just at the moment of they enter your shopping mall, but kind of throughout the year, this probably will be the winning strategy. I think that one more thing, it's not necessarily prop tech, but it's more kind of a thinking about the retail space, right? We talked about online and how people are probably going to be pushed to be more digital consumers than physical consumers, if you will. I think that in some of the cases, in many shopping centers around the world, it's probably time for a hybrid strategy, which is already happening in China in a big way. Kind of the shopping malls are usually situated in very good locations with strong catchment areas. So why not to have a shopping mall and a distribution center in the same place? Of course, you need to design it a little bit differently. You need to make sure you divide between those two. But really, I think that that will be probably a strategy of those winning retail owners going forward. You provide last mile logistics, both to a catchment area, but also to people who just come into your shopping mall and want to order something online. And guess what? They can go to the fulfillment center in that same shopping center and get it right away, right? So instant gratification, just like in sort of physical and online experience in a way. But also, I think this whole crisis really will make us all think long and hard. Do we take those risks seriously? I mean, will those type of pandemics come back, or it's a once in a lifetime event? And do we want to be ready to sort of keep our properties operating even in those unprecedented times of lockdowns? And those hybrid strategies, I think, can help to mitigate those risks.
I say it was interesting going, you know, as recently as a month or two ago, the #1 topic for, you know, landlords and for tenants was around ESG, exactly what you talked about, Ariel, because I think it's been increasingly important to the consumer. Where do you think that falls in the spectrum? And that could be, you know, and a bigger focus on really sustainability. Where do you think this falls right now? And especially as we're all spending more time at home and we're repurposing, reducing, reusing, recycling, right there already is almost a, it's just happening, right? Even without us telling consumers to do this. So maybe you can shed some light on that for us.
So I mean, in terms of, are you saying in terms of the digital side of that? So kind of how we, I mean, look, I think that, again, as a individual consumers, given that we're sort of stuck at home, we'll probably take stock of what's needed, what's necessary, and what's not so necessary, right? Especially given another alarming trend that's, you know, we don't know how long is this shutdown going to continue for, whether it's in the US, Europe, Hong Kong, even China, where things are slowly starting to go back to normal, which means that a huge percentage of population will not have as much disposable income to spend on anything besides the daily necessities. So I think that we will be rethinking kind of what is necessary, what is kind of that all extras. And of course, the majority of that wallet, the spending wallet, will be spent on those necessities, I would say. Whether, by the way, necessity is not necessarily, not just, you know, food, but it's anything. Again, we're coming back to the health issue. What are the things that you need, whether it's supplements, vitamins, medicine, etc., masks, in particular. But I think that we will emerge from this a little bit more sustainable. Now, the flip side of this is that e-commerce, of course, has been known for the last number of years as well. It's great, but it's also not so great. So because your carbon footprint is actually quite large, right? I mean, you keep sending those boxes with like 1, 2, 3 items every week. What do we do with that? So I don't necessarily have the answer to that yet, but I think that again, that it comes back to the last mile. Yeah. And bringing it back to real estate, because I am trying to merge between this digital, the retail and the physical discussion. I think that again, from the industrial sector, the warehousing sector point of view, that last mile logistics, what is the most sustainable, right? How we can create this very seamless direct to consumer journey and last mile logistic, but without, you know, so much of polluting in a way, right? And so I think that those, they're still to be seen, but I think that some very interesting paradigms will emerge from this.
Well, it's interesting in our poll, what was most important for retailers right now was exactly what you had said earlier before the call, Ariel, which was a strong balance sheet and kind of reducing expenses and last mile delivery were tied. This last mile, one of the things I'm seeing that, you know, I would say that some of the retailers have done an amazing job in the past 18 months, you know, whether it's curbside delivery or pickup. And, you know, they're also, if we think about it from an ESG perspective, but even from a consumer convenience, consumer connection perspective, if we see them kind of, it's on their terms, right? They don't have to, right? Everyone's time starved. They can order their goods ahead of time. You know, when they pull up to the parking lot, it's geo-fenced and the retailer knows that they're coming. The other thing from like a social perspective is if we start to get to know that person, or we even, you know, kind of have a delivery window, even if we're going to the physical retailer where we have a relationship with the person who's bringing the groceries or the goods to our car, right? That can, I've thought about that as a, you know, new way of engagement. And even if, right, if there's a new product, this person can tell the, you know, person in the car about it, right? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity as we're changing so rapidly how we shop. And it's just a matter of, you know, retailers and landlords feeling comfortable. I mean, they, you know, kind of jumping outside their skin. I think that's really it, right? Being comfortable to try new things. I don't know what you've seen in terms of, I mean, anything interesting from a last mile perspective. There's so much outside of the drones and the drone airports. You know, there's so much that I think retailers are trying. Some of it is still kind of in the innovation phases.
Yeah, and the thing that, you know, as he was speaking, I was thinking, I mean, how ironic is that if your delivery guy will also become kind of the traveling salesman, and we're going back to what we had before shopping centers, right? But reality is that, you know, I think that connection between people is irreplaceable. So it's really sort of that balance between convenience, right? The convenience of the online shopping, but also the delayed gratification. I mean, I want my Amazon order to arrive like right now, right? Which you can have in a store where you go and you buy something and it's right now, rather than waiting whatever time. I think that it's still to be seen. I think that, of course, drones is a really interesting sort of solving that last mile logistics, and it's cool, it's gamifying, right? I think there are just really regulatory issues with that, right? And safety issues, etc. So it's easier said than done, right? I think that it's really interesting whether your delivery van, in a way, will become your marketing tool and more, right? Again, we're sort of going back to just like, you know, food trucks in New York and LA, right? I mean, we've had them, and for people on the call, I lived in New York before I moved to Asia about 12 years ago. I'm very familiar with the food truck. I'm not familiar so much with the gourmet food truck, that whole trend, which basically grew in the last few years, right? So do you have those points of engagement, sort of those portable or movable points of engagement? I mean, can you, you know, be flexible with what you're doing with your delivery point? It's just like, again, in real estate, we're talking about, well, you know, can we sort of get revenue really from a particular space 24 hours a day? So whether it's, you know, offices, for example, or, you know, shopping centers, they close, the stores close at 8, but can you do a public concert in sort of the auditorium? Can you keep the property going and people are coming into that particular physical space just because something interesting is happening there? So I think that, again, we will see those, the emergence of those sort of tools. And the reality is, at least from the real estate perspective, it will all come down to the bottom line, right? I mean, what works and what can improve my bottom line? Will my profitability improve? And it's really either I'm increasing the revenue line, right? So, okay, I have fixed rent or just turnover rent, whatever is the new model. But then what can I put on top? Services, concerts, etc. And then how do I decrease my expenses? And again, in expenses, I think that the whole sort of prop tech tools can really help. So that's kind of going, and I'm sorry, we're going a little bit sidetracked from the question, but I think that it's really important because everyone is in the trying and error.
It really is. And I think everyone's investing. And I just, in our last 5 minutes, I want to ask the audience if they have any questions to just chat me, and I'll ask you. You know, also from the poll, I thought was very interesting is the belief that not only food retailers, but direct to consumer will be the strongest retailers kind of post our current crisis. I have to say, I've been surprised, at least what we've seen in Greater China right now. And we have a team in Shanghai who sent me, I think they've been surprised too. They've sent me many pictures of, right, like waiting lines for luxury. And just kind of how quickly, and certainly depends, you know, location, but how quickly that sector has snapped back, really. And, you know, what would you have thought, kind of based on, you know, kind of early indications, what would be the first sector that would kind of snap back, and whether that would be online or offline, or really a merge of the both?
Well, I think actually, and I saw the poll results. I think that at least in Hong Kong, maybe in New York as well, kind of knowing those two cities, I think that the F&B will be the first one to emerge. I mean, God knows we will be bored in the end of this month, and everyone will want to eat out. And I think that it's, again, this will probably be the first thing that people will do, especially given that we will all be sitting in front of our computers and shopping online anyway. I think that in China, because of the two things, again, very strong sort of desires for luxury goods, and also, again, a lot of those smart luxury goods brands, they've been around for years. They know how to engage their clients. I mean, they were just ready to get everyone back into their stores, right? And that's, of course, through their own methods of digital engagement, right? The WeChat channels and the likes. So I think, but I would put my money on F&B. It's just like, you know, we were talking about the sectors in general, while hospitality sector, of course, is going to go through a horrible time right now for a variety of reasons. But I think that hospitality probably will recover a little bit quicker than retail, because you cannot replace an experience of going to an hotel when people will be comfortable to travel and also allowed to travel. Right now, you can't even go anywhere, right? And people will be, again, really wanting to go into that experience. But shopping is something that the longer this sort of lockdown situation continues, the more those sort of digital habits become more ingrained. and the more the adoption curve will become much faster, right? So I think that those sort of, so, and hospitality for me, again, it's that experience. So I think that anything to do with a particular experience probably will recover a little bit faster.
So we have a few questions from the audience, and I want to be respectful of your time and everyone on the line as well. So I'll ask two of them, and then we'll wrap up. You know, is this a time for owners and developers to rethink their businesses from a tech point of view?
I think absolutely. Again, I might be biased. I've been kind of in the prop tech space now for a number of years. I've been an active angel investor, but it's beyond angel investor. It's more, I'm very passionate about how real estate industry is sort of becoming a little bit more like an Apple store, where your customer experience is second to none, and where you get that product that basically is your digital life, right? So I think that this is the time to try to, of course, it's time of crisis, so you might not want to spend money necessarily of any unproven technology. But again, if you see particular tools that can immediately help you reduce expenses, for example, in whatever expense category possible, of course, you might want to consider it and integrate it in your portfolio very quickly, because that will help your bottom line, right? I think that, you know, we will probably, the owners will not be focused and shouldn't be focused, frankly, on anything too creative. I don't know, like some creative holograms that you would put in your shopping centers to engage people to come in, because again, it will cost money and there is absolutely no clear revenue path for that. But again, anything to do with reduction of your expenses by using, by using technology smartly, and on another hand, making technology your friend really in anything to do with data mining and customer engagement, etc. I mean, this will help to drive your top line, your revenue. So I think absolutely.
So we had another question, and we'll wrap it up here. It was around kind of, you know, do we see a much more kind of virtual, you know, just kind of shopping experience with VR, et cetera, and how does that, you know, kind of extend? I mean, we've seen many of the luxury retailers have, you know, kind of VR fashion shows. And also too, just for the audience, you know, in China, you can pay through VR, which we don't have in the West. And it's just, I mean, it's just at a different level in terms of experience. But maybe you can just talk about VR and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, I think, again, this is something that you have the luxury to spend a little bit of money on it. I think right now, again, it would, if you already have a platform ready, of course, it would be an amazing tool to engage with your customers, right? I mean, you have captive audience. Everyone is at home and people need entertainment, right? So this could be an absolute differentiator in a way. I mean, seeing a VR fashion show and seeing, or whatever it is, not just fashion, in my opinion. I think that going forward, I mean, look, I heard someone saying that what's happening now is kind of like the prequel to Ready Player One, where everyone is living in sort of this complete VR digital reality and the world is controlled by few, and it's very kind of apocalyptic and utopian. But this is how that happened, because the movie doesn't really tell you what happened before.
So this is what happened before, Ariel.
I mean, we're all living for this. I hope not, to be honest. I think that, you know, are we going toward a complete VR-based shopping experience? I don't think so, because I think that even if you buy everything, you know, your wardrobe, for example, if we stay on fashion for a second, on VR, kind of on watching VR fashion shows and buying as we go. But again, you need to wear those clothes to go somewhere. So, and that somewhere can be a shopping mall, but which provides a completely different experience. It's not just going there and trying things and shopping, but it's the physical showrooms. Again, F&B, anything to do with kind of getting people together, right? And I think that, again, this crisis will probably bring people closer to each other when we'll be allowed to get out of the social distancing. I think that, again, it will take time, and I think it's really individual, right? I mean, some people will, the minute sort of the lockdown is taken down, will be running out on the street. Some people will be more cautious. It's, of course, it's an individual perspective, but I think that VR also has an opportunity here to sort of become an integrated part of the shopping experience going forward. And so for VR companies or, you know, prop tech companies or retail tech companies rather, providing those VR solutions, I think this is an opportunity. And I think it will probably come more through the brand, the tenants themselves, rather than
well,
the
interesting thing could be, right, I mean, what I've always, I mean, this has been my dream, not our current state, but this idea of being able to shop a mall virtually, right, through VR, and then to have all the products delivered, but I could still have that kind of experience, right, especially if, you know, it's, like you said, after 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, right, the malls are closed, and I mean, Ariel, you and I stay up quite late, and so, I mean, so at midnight or 2 in the morning, right, when I want to go shopping, that's definitely an interesting thought. And I want to wrap it up with this, is I've always believed also, first of all, the return rate of goods in the US is very high, much higher than it is in the East. And much of that is because we have less product description pages, we don't have embedded videos, we aren't always sure what we're buying. And if you have VR, right, and you really have kind of a 360 view of what you're buying, you could significantly, I mean, there will be positives, like you said, that will come out of this. You could see a reduction in, you know, returns, which means a reduction in waste, and also longer term, you know, more profitability for the retailers. So there's definitely some interesting ideas in terms of, you know, what can come out of this. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Ariel, this was unbelievable. We could have talked for another hour. I know everyone on the line.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you on again soon, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, and stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.